without closing a gap. Of today's presentation, and I hope I can clarify this theme to you in the next few minutes. So I'll be starting with the what, the why, and the how, and the gist of this presentation that I'm going to make today. So what are the clefts? So these are congenital anomalies, which I'll be elaborating in more detail later on, and why they need timely intervention. It's because of the functional problems as well as the aesthetic problems that these kids have. And next, I'll be progressing to how these cases are managed, including the multidisciplinary team which is involved, and how the plastic surgeons play a central role in this team, and how multiple surgeries are often required, and how they need to be performed in a timely manner. So we'll start with what is a cleft. So if you open an English language dictionary, an Oxford or a Cambridge dictionary, this is what you will find. It is something which has been split, divided, or partially divided into two. However, cleft lip and palate is not just that. It is not just a lip or a palate which has been divided into two. It is not just a gap. It is a spectrum of anomalies. It can be something as mild as you see in this image as an incomplete cleft lip, or it can be as severe as a complete bilateral cleft of the lip and the palate. And the deformity not only involves the lip and the palate, it also involves the alveolus, the maxilla, as well as the nose. Before proceeding further, we need to understand why these anomalies occur. So if you look at the embryology of the face and how it develops, so around the 4th week of life, in the first image that you see on the left, there are these three processes: the frontonasal process, the maxillary process, and the mandibular process. These three combine together to form the face. The frontonasal process, around the 5th or the 6th week of intrauterine life, develop these nasal pits around which the developing nose is there. And on either side of this are the two medial and lateral nasal processes. These, when the medial nasal processes, they move towards each other, towards the midline, and fuse with each other in the midline. And laterally, they fuse with the maxillary process, as you can see in the third image, which is labeled C. So the yellow is the medial nasal process, and the green is the maxillary process. So the medial nasal process is forming the philtrum of the upper lip, whereas the rest of the upper lip is being formed by the maxillary process. If due to some congenital defect, if there's lack of fusion, if these don't fuse together, then that is what gives rise to a cleft lip. And if it doesn't fuse on both sides, it would give rise to a bilateral cleft lip. And the palate also develops around the same time. It starts around 7 weeks when there are these two palatine shelves which are aligned horizontally. Later, around the 8th week, the tongue increases in size and moves upwards. This forces the palatine shelves to become more vertical to allow for the growing tongue. But by the 10th week of intrauterine life, the tongue again descends down into the oral cavity. And if you see in the last image, the lowest one, at 10th week, the palatine shelves align themselves horizontally again and fuse in the midline. This gives rise to the secondary palate, as we call it, the pinkish appearing palate. The anterior most part of the palate, which is yellow in color, comes from the medial nasal process, which was forming the philtrum of the lip, if you remember from the previous slide. And in between the two is the incisive foramen. Before we come to how a cleft lip or a palate presents, I'll briefly talk about the normal lip. So if you look at a normal lip, on the left side, this image of a girl, there's a white skin roll. This is what is present in between the vermilion and the skin of the upper lip. It's a continuous smooth line with a slight depression in the midline, which is what is known as the Cupid's bow. And just above that is the dimple in the upper lip, which is the philtral dimple, and on either side is other philtral columns. This is how a normal lip should appear. And on the image on the right, this is a very important image to understand the anomaly which is there in cleft lip, because this shows the muscle underlying the lip, which is the orbicularis oris muscle. So if you have a look at the muscle, it's a continuous structure, if there's no break in it, the muscle fibers from either side, they intermingle with each other across the philtrum and insert into the contralateral philtral column. So this is important for the functioning of the lip, the movements of the lip, for there to be symmetrical movements. And this is what is abnormal in a cleft lip. So we'll have a look at the anomalies that are present in a child with a cleft lip. As you can see, the white roll is deficient. There's a break in the white roll. And the philtral dimple is also shallower on the side of the cleft. The philtrum column on the cleft side is practically absent. And if it's a complete cleft lip, the nasal floor communicates with the oral cavity. Even the maxilla on the cleft side is hypoplastic. And if you have a look on the image on the right, which shows the muscles are not in a continuous sling. So they are inserted abnormally. On one side, they are inserting onto the columella, while on the other side, they are inserting near the base of the ala. So this results in abnormal pull on these structures by the muscle, which results in a flattening of the nose on that side. Even the columella gets displaced due to the pull of the muscles, and the nasal ala base is also displaced laterally and posteriorly. Similarly, if we have a look at the normal palate, this is what it looks like. There's a hard palate anteriorly, which is bony, and posteriorly is a soft palate, which is a more muscular structure. There are so many muscles which are there in the palate, soft palate, the most important one being the levator veli palatini. This forms a continuous sling, as you can see in the middle image. This, what is labeled as number 6. Now, this sling of muscle, which is the levator veli palatini, is very important for the functioning of the palate. The function of the palate is basically uh, to separate the oral cavity from the nasal cavity during either deglutition or during speech. So this function is lost in a patient with a cleft palate, which you see here. As you can see, there's a gap. This may or may not extend into the alveolus, depending on whether the cleft of the palate is associated with the lip or not. And the muscles, they are abnormally inserted here onto the posterior edge of the hard palate. And hence they are unable to raise the soft palate as is necessary during speech and deglutition. Now, coming to the epidemiology and the presence of this problem, if you have a look at this map of India, you'll see that this map is showing the number of people who are living with unrepaired cleft lip and palate in India by each state. Rajasthan has around 7 per 1 lakh population of people living with unrepaired cleft lip and palate. And if you extrapolate that to the population of Rajasthan, which is around 7 crores, around 5,000 people are living with unrepaired cleft lip and palate in Rajasthan alone. So the problem is big, and there are not enough people who are treating them. And there's also a lack of awareness amongst the people. That's why they do not seek treatment in a timely manner. The incidence is of cleft lip with or without a palate is around 1 in 1,000 to around 1 in 500 live births. Isolated cleft palate is considered to be a separate entity from cleft lip with or without a palate, and isolated cleft palate has an incidence of around 1 in 2,000 live births. Cleft lip and palate together is the most common entity, accounting for around 46%, whereas cleft lip alone is the rarest one, accounting for just 21% of all cases. If you have a look at the risk factors which cause this, you'll see all the usual suspects. These are the maternal intake of medications like phenytoin, steroids, isotretinoin, maternal smoking, high parental age, antenatal infections like rubella and toxoplasmosis, vitamin deficiencies, and most of these cases are sporadic, but they can also be X-linked or autosomal dominant. And many of these are associated with other congenital anomalies, especially cardiac and CNS anomalies, or they may also be associated with syndromes such as Van der Wood, velocardiofacial syndrome, or Apert syndrome, or Treacher's-Collins syndrome. The family history, if you have a look, it has a significant role to play. And this non-syndromic inheritance is usually multifactorial. This table here shows how likely a child is to be born with a cleft lip or a palate if any of the family members are also affected by the same uh, defect. Next, we'll come to some of the clinical presentations of these children, and then we'll proceed to some of the cases which we have treated here in AIIMS Jodhpur. So a child who presents with a cleft lip, this is how he appears. The biggest problem is, as obvious, is the external appearance. There's a large defect in the upper lip, and the lip seal is not possible, which can cause some problems during feeding. There's a nasal deformity, which I described in more detail earlier, and there's also hypoplasia of the maxilla on the ipsilateral side. And there's also a cleft in the alveolus, which is the part of the jaw where the teeth are present, and this is in the region of the canine. Coming to a child with cleft palate, their biggest problem is not cosmetic or not aesthetic, because a cleft in the palate is not visible from the outside. The biggest problem that they have is the difficulty in feeding. This is because they're unable to create a negative intraoral pressure as the oral cavity and the nasal cavity are communicating. And this causes a difficulty in sucking the milk, as well as results in nasal regurgitation. If they're able to feed, the feeds also enter into the nasal cavity. Along with this, they have a hypernasal voice, again, because the oral and the nasal cavities are communicating. And they also have a hypoplasia of the maxilla. The muscles of the soft palate, the levator and the tensor veli palatini, they originate around the eustachian tube. And because of the abnormal insertion of these muscles, the eustachian tube's draining function is also abnormal. And this can result in recurrent middle ear infections in these children. Now, if you can just take 5 seconds to have a look at this image of a palate in a child, and what do you think? Does it appear normal? So at first glance, yes, it looks pretty normal. There is no cleft, there's no gap. But if you look closely, you'll see a few features. There's a zona pellucida. There's a translucent white streak in the midline of the soft palate. And if you see, the uvula is bifid. And when I palpated the palate of this child, I found a notched posterior nasal spine. Now, these are the typical features of the triad of something called the submucous cleft palate. This is a variant of a cleft palate. It's practically a cleft palate in all functional sense, because the muscle sling is absent and the muscles are abnormally inserted, just like a cleft palate. It's just that the mucosa in the midline has fused somewhat, but there is velopharyngeal insufficiency, that is the function of the soft palate is abnormal, and these also need to be treated just like regular cleft palates. So we saw that there's a big spectrum of problems that these kids have. The first is the external appearance, where they have issues with self-image, they have difficulties in living normal social lives. There are feeding issues because they are not able to feed properly. There are issues with the speech, which is abnormal. There are issues with the dentition, which is again abnormal. There's crowding of teeth. The palatine shelves may not be aligned. So there are so many problems, and they all need to be addressed while trying to treat a patient with cleft lip or palate. In order to better manage these cases, a lot of classifications have been given, but the most ubiquitously accepted one has been given by Dr. G. Balakrishnan from Nagpur. And this classification is therefore called the Nagpur classification of clefts. This has classified it into 3 types: groups 1, 2, and 3. Group 1 being a cleft of the lip alone, group 2 being a cleft of the palate alone, and group 3 being a cleft of the lip with the alveolus and the palate. So we'll see a few examples. Group 1 cleft, which is an isolated cleft lip, can vary in severity from the first image that you see on the left, which is just a mild cleft involving only the vermilion, or it can involve an incomplete cleft involving the vermilion as well as the skin of the upper lip, which you can see in the middle image, or it can be a complete lip cleft involving the entire lip, the nasal floor, as well as the alveolus. Now, isolated cleft palates are group 2, and they usually involve both the soft and the hard palate. But there are situations like the one on the right where it can involve only the soft palate and the hard palate may not be cleft. Group 3 clefts are the most severe. As you can see, there's a cleft involving the lip, the alveolus, as well as the palate. And lastly, we can also have bilateral clefts. These can also range in severity from incomplete clefts of the lip, or you can have a bilateral group 1A where both the lip and the alveolus are cleft, or the most severe form, which is on the right, which is a cleft involving bilateral lip as well as the palate. Now I'll be talking about how these cases are managed and showing a few examples of children who have been operated here at AIIMS Jodhpur. Starting off, these children with cleft usually require a multidisciplinary care. Plastic surgeons have a central role to play in these patients, but the pediatrician is usually the first point of contact for these patients, and that is where we get the referrals from. The other parts of the team are the orthodontists who play a very important role, which I'll be discussing in more detail later. The pedodontists, the oral surgeons also have a role to play, especially for those who perform orthognathic surgeries. There are geneticists who need to evaluate other other congenital problems. A social worker is often required to help integrate these patients back into their social life. A speech therapist plays a very important role because of the abnormal speech that these children often develop. So it's not just a one-person job, an entire team of multidisciplinary care is required. And therefore, these children are best managed in institutes with super specialities and all specialities being present under the same roof. Now, these children need to be operated at an ideal time. These ideal timings, if the surgery is performed at these ideal times, the results are wonderful. They have the best functional as well as aesthetic outcome. And the most important ones are the ones which are highlighted here in yellow. That is the cleft lip repair, which should be performed around 3 months of age, maybe up to 6 months, but shouldn't be delayed more than that, ideally. And cleft palate should be managed by 12 months of age. That is the age before the child starts speaking, so that they don't develop abnormal speech. Now, the orthodontists have a big role to play, which starts right after birth, even before the surgical management begins. This is known as the pre-surgical orthopedics. Note that I've not called it orthodontics because these kids do not have teeth yet, so an orthodontics would be a misnomer. Therefore, it's called as a pre-surgical orthopedics. And this makes the surgical repair much easier because they are able to align the palatine shelves in line with each other. I will show a few examples. If you see this child with a wide cleft of the lip, now with pre-surgical orthopedics, they are able to decrease the deformity significantly, and this makes this job of the surgeon much easier and results in much better outcomes. And similarly, another case with a wide cleft of the lip, which has been treated by a device called the nasoalveolar molding device. And this is the result which is obtained even before the surgery is performed. So as you can see, the lip and the alveolar arches are aligned so nicely together that it makes the surgery much easier and without any tension. So coming to a cleft lips repair, I will be also showing some examples. So the aim of this is to to state the obvious, is to repair the cleft and to close the gap which is there between the two lips. But that's not all. As you can see, the lip is shorter on the side of the cleft, so this needs to be lengthened. The muscle continuity needs to be restored, as I showed you earlier in the anatomy of a cleft. And the labius sulcus needs to be created, and the nasal deformity has to be corrected as much as possible during the primary cleft lip repair. And if all these are addressed, these are the kinds of results that we can get. As you can see, the lip has been lengthened, the cleft has been repaired very well with a very visible scar. The muscle continuity has been maintained, and this is evident by no deformities or during animation of the upper lip. And even the nasal deformity has been corrected to a significant extent. So for cleft lip surgery, there are two techniques which are very popular across the world. These have been given by Millard and the other one by Tennyson and Randall. We follow both of them as and when required. And an incomplete cleft of the lip is also supposed to be treated exactly like a complete cleft, because even though the deformity appears lesser from the outside, inside the muscle continuity is absent and the muscle is still abnormal, and the lip is also short. So this has to be treated exactly like a regular complete cleft of the lip. These images show a surgery on such a child. As you can see, the complete cleft has been recreated right up to the sill of the nose and uh, down to the vermilion, and has been repaired by the Tennyson Randall technique. And these are the kind of results that we can obtain with this properly performed surgery. As you can see, the lip has been lengthened adequately, the nasal deformity has been decreased, and there's a good alignment of all the anatomical landmarks. Similarly, another case with a complete, more severe cleft of the upper lip, and these are the results after the surgery. One more child with a complete cleft of the left upper lip. As you can see, even the nasal deformity has been corrected to a significant degree. This involves dissection of the lower lateral cartilages and realigning them. Next, we'll come to the more severe deformity, which is a bilateral cleft lip. These also have certain techniques, like this one has been operated by a technique called the Vos repair for a bilateral cleft lip. And another child with incomplete bilateral cleft lip. As you can see, they're excellent final outcome aesthetically, and even functionally, the muscle continuity has been restored. So the animation of the lip is nearly normal. But not every surgery goes well. There are so many aspects of the surgery where things can go wrong. The first one is if the anatomical landmarks are not aligned properly. As you can see in this child here, the white roll on either side has not been aligned properly. There's a notching of the upper lip. There's inadequate lengthening of the upper lip, which has been done. And sometimes even the muscle repair is inadequate. And even though from the outside it may appear as if the lip has been repaired properly, whenever the patient is speaking, you can see significant deformities in the upper lip. So these are due to inadequate or improper muscle repairs. As you can also see in the other patient here, the lip has not been lengthened adequately. Neither there has been a good muscle repair, which is evident because of the depression in the vermilion. And the most severe complication which can occur is if there's a dehiscence of these repairs. In our department, we get a significant number of patients with these secondary deformities after a cleft lip repair, which has been performed at other centers. So we do a lot of revision surgeries for cleft lips. These need to be performed very similar to a primary cleft lip repair. A full thickness cleft is recreated by incising along the repair site. And the most important step in this surgery is to repair the muscle. And the nasal deformity can also be addressed at the same time. So these are the results after a revision of a cleft lip surgery, which has been performed outside with not very good results initially, but after revision, the patient was quite happy. He had a nearly normal appearing upper lip. This is another example of a left-sided cleft lip, which was managed in childhood, and the patient presented to us as an adult with this deformity in the upper lip, which was corrected by the Tennyson-Randall technique. And we could get good results with good realignment of the white roll and being lengthening of the upper lip. Similarly, this is another 25-year-old female who came with a lip repair which had been performed in the early childhood. And even though the lip repair appears pretty okay from the outside, whenever the patient spoke or we asked her to make a whistling kind of shape of the lips, there was a big depression in the region of the repair. This was because the muscles had not been approximated properly across the cleft lip repair. Also, she had this significant nasal deformity which had not been addressed. This is also partially because the muscles had not been repaired properly earlier. And so we did a revision of the cleft lip. This is at 2 months follow-up. If you see in the middle image, the nasal deformity has also been improved significantly. And even on the right side, even in the profile view, if you see the nasal tip projection has been improved significantly. And the upper lip was also revised and the muscle was re-repaired across the cleft lip. And now she does not have any animation deformities. Coming to cleft palate repair, the aims of this repair are to give an anatomical closure of the defect which is there, as well as to create an apparatus for normal speech, which is the soft palate. The levator, specifically the levator velar palatini, is the most important muscle which is required. And at the same time, we have to ensure that there is no or minimal disturbance to the maxillary growth. Therefore, these surgeries are delayed up to an age of 1 year. There are many techniques which have been described for cleft palate repair, and each technique has its own specific applications we choose according to the patient. Our favorite technique in most patients is the two-flap palatoplasty as described by Bardak. This is how we perform. This is a child in which we have performed a cleft palate repair by this technique. And this is another patient in which we have performed the same surgery. Sometimes we perform a technique known as the Furlow's palatoplasty, which involves a Z-plasty, which helps in lengthening the palate, which is often required because the palate in these patients is sometimes quite short. And even after a palatoplasty, the soft palate is unable to meet the posterior pharyngeal wall, which is required for normal speech function. I will come into that in more detail in a bit. But again, like in cleft lip, there are many parts of the surgeries where things can go wrong, and we do deal with a lot of patients who come with complications due to cleft palate repair having been performed inadequately or improperly at other centers. And we do a lot of revision surgeries for these patients. The first thing which can go wrong is an inadequate lengthening of the palate, or there can be an inadequate muscle repair, or there can be a dehiscence of a part of the repair which results in a palatal fistula. As you can see in this girl over here, there's a small fistula in the middle of the palate, or it can be an even bigger fistula like you can see in this boy over here. In the anterior part of the palate, the entire repair has given way and dehisced. Or the most significant or severe complication which can occur is a necrosis of the palatal flaps, the mucoperiosteal flaps, which are used during surgery, which results in a much larger defect. As you can see in this last image, 1/2 of the palate has completely necrosed after surgery. So these are the complications which can occur. We do deal with these. This is the same child that we saw in the previous image with a large anterior palatal fistula. This has been repaired first by closing the nasal layer, and then by a principle similar to the Bardak's two-flap palatoplasty, we have closed the oral side, and the fistula has been closed. Next, what the problem these kids often develop, even after a surgical correction, if there's been inadequate lengthening, is the velopharyngeal insufficiency, which is an abnormality in the speech. If you look at the normal functioning of the velopharynx, the velum, which is the soft palate, as you can see over here, it goes and meets the posterior pharyngeal wall. This is important to to close the communication between the oral cavity and the nasal cavity. This is especially required during speech when we are speaking pressure consonants. Now, these are the letters like ba, pa, like saying papa or dada. That is when the soft palate goes and meets the posterior pharyngeal wall, and we are able to produce enough pressure in the oral cavity to be able to speak these alphabets. However, in patients with cleft palate, even after a surgery or prior to surgery, there's a definite communication. Even after surgery, if the muscles have been not repaired adequately or the palate has not been lengthened adequately, the palate is not able to go and meet the posterior pharyngeal wall. So when these kids try to speak these pressure consonants, they are unable to create the necessary pressure inside the oral cavity as the air escapes into the nasal cavity and it comes out through the nose. So these alphabets are mispronounced. If you ask them to say Baba or Papa, it will sound like Mama because of this problem. Similarly, Ta and Da are pronounced as Na. So if you ask them to say Dada, it will sound like Nana. Now, this is a big problem in the social life of the child, and therefore these do need to be treated. So the aim of the surgery is that the velum should go and meet the posterior pharyngeal wall. This can be achieved by a few ways. First, we can lengthen the palate. For example, with the Furlow's palatoplasty, I had shown you an example earlier where we do a Z-plasty in the palate. Then we can also make the posterior pharyngeal wall come forward to meet the palate. This can be achieved by a posterior pharyngeal flap or a sphincter pharyngoplasty, as has been shown in this image over here. Or lastly, if the patient is not willing for surgeries, then passive devices like such, which are the palatal lift devices, they are fixed onto the palate and they lift the posterior part of the soft palate up so that it can easily meet the posterior pharyngeal wall. These patients also need multiple surgeries throughout their life. For example, around the age of 11 years, the permanent canine will erupt. But if they have a cleft in this region, in the region of the alveolus, this needs to be filled prior to that. So ideally, between 7 to 9 years of age, we perform a bone grafting for the alveolar cleft. We do need the support and help from orthodontists for the pre and post surgical management in these patients. We harvest the bone graft from the iliac crest, the cancellous bone graft, and we use that to obliterate the alveolar cleft. These kids also have a maxillary hypoplasia, as you can see in this girl over here. The maxilla is severely hypoplastic and retruded. So the preferred surgical technique is a Leefort 1 maxillary advancement, where the entire maxilla is osteotomized and moved anteriorly. Lastly, once they reach the age of 18 years and the skeletal maturity has been achieved, a rhinoplasty is often required to correct the nasal deformity. I showed you one example earlier. These are a few more examples. As you can see, the collapsed ala on the right side has been realigned into a more anatomical location to give a much more aesthetically appearing nose. The lip repair has also been revised simultaneously, which is often a routine. Another patient where the rhinoplasty has been performed to correct the nasal deformity. So to summarize, cleft care is a multidisciplinary approach. It requires the help from multiple specialties, but the plastic surgeons play a central role in managing these patients. Multiple surgeries are often required throughout the early part of the life of these patients. And timely surgical corrections, they give the best outcome, both functionally as well as aesthetically. And the cleft lip repair should be performed ideally 3 to 6 months of age. And the cleft palate repair should be performed before the first birthday of the child. Revision surgeries are often required after improper or inadequate management, but still reasonably good final outcomes can be expected if it is performed by expert surgeons. These are a few statistics of the surgeries that we on cleft lips and palates that we have performed in our department. As you can see in the green colors here, a significant portion of the patients that we get are those who need revision surgeries. We have been able to get good results in these cases as well. And this is possible because we have a department with 6 faculty members who all have good expertise in managing cleft lip and palate patients. And we also I want to give a special acknowledgement to the Department of Anesthesia. Without their support and help, we would not be able to do any of these cases. These children often have a very difficult airway, and even the anesthesia is not easy. But thankfully, we have a very good team over here who has been able to manage all these patients properly. So the take-home message of today's presentation is that it's not just about closing a gap in a child with cleft lip or palate. They require an in-depth knowledge of the problem for the surgeon to perform the surgery properly. Both functional as well as aesthetic considerations have to be kept in mind, and meticulous anatomical realignment of tissues is the most important principle during the surgery. And despite these, multiple secondary procedures are often required in these kids. But timely and proper surgical intervention can allow a patient to lead a normal life. And if you are this guy, Joaquin Phoenix, you can even go on to win an Oscar after having had a cleft lip surgery. Thank you very much. We'll now be uh, going to the panel discussion for a few questions with the experts.
Dr. Purani has raised his hand. I think you should take audience first.
Okay, yeah. So I couldn't stop myself. Good morning, all. I felt like I'm attending a lecture of a great stalwarts, and I felt like a medical student. What an enthralling presentation, Aniket. I'm so impressed with your presentation. What a clear-cut demonstration of and presentation skills. Really enthralling, and it's outstanding, I must say. This is I felt like I'm in a student, and there is some good teacher who's teaching a topic. It was so crystal clear in his presentation and everything. I just wanted to congratulate your team and praise you for your presentation skill. This is the way I think one of the best presentation I have come across on any particular topic. I'm not exaggerating. I can tell you it is coming from my heart. Really kudos to you for your this impressive, enthralling presentation. I am at awe. Okay, so now I have two questions related to it. Will the 3D printing will be really helpful to you in planning surgery and teaching and simulation and other process? One question. The second question is, I came across some article which says that this can be corrected in utero. I really do not know what's happening on this field. So could you just elaborate on these two questions of mine? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for your good words. Um, these both your questions are valid, and they are. But these the 3D printing as well as the fetal surgery for this, they are both still experimental, and maybe they'll have a role in the future. But they are still in an experimental phase right now. The 3D printing is being used to plan the surgery in advance, but they have not shown many significant benefit of doing that because it is quite a costly exercise, and whether it really does improve the final outcome is still controversial. And fetal surgery puts the child at a risk in utero. There are risk of miscarriages. Now, whether to perform a cleft lip repair at, by taking that risk, or should we perform the cleft lip repair after the child is born, is again controversial. So these both are being studied at some centers across the world, but there's no definite answer as of now.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sir, one point to add, 3D printing and simulations, sir, we can use for train our trainees initially. But ultimately, they have to do live surgeries. Only then they can have a actual knowledge of the issue and how to address it properly. Only then it is possible. Simulation you can give a pre-operative. You can say pre-operative assumptions. Okay, we will do this, then we will achieve this. We will do this, then we will achieve this. So ultimately, the true sense of confidence will only occur when we have life surgeries. And definitely they have, in training, we can say they have role.
Uh, I would like to ask a few questions to the panel members here. So, Sir Prakash Kala, sir, how would you, if a child comes to you immediately after birth with a cleft lip and a palate, what would be the advice that you would give to the parents?
Yeah. Again, I congratulate you, Aniket. You presented it very nicely. It was an important topic because not only lay people, but there are so many educated and medical people from the medical professions even not know how to handle with the issue, where to refer it. So the patients and the relatives keep on, moving from one doctor to one surgeon to another, and this way sometimes we will not be able to achieve a proper outcomes. And this topic, as Pranit already said, that you have nicely covered topic. One more point I want to add that because of aesthetic sense, the eyes is not closed, especially in the children. Regarding this, all the patients and their attendants have been consented to, and they agree to use photo for educational purposes. See, when any home baby comes with a split lip, small or larger, it's a panic situation for the family because everybody wants a normal child. So our aim of the today's presentation to cover these topics is just to aware the at least in among medical profession regarding these problems. And this so when the pediatrician refer a cleft lip patient or any cleft patient to us, first of all, our duty is to consolidate them, to assure them there is no abnormality, to make tell them that it's not a very odd things you have, and your your child will have not have a normal life. So we have to tell them it's a common problem and not very rare problems, not common, but and it can be very well treated. So first step starts to consolidate the or to assure the parents. And when the patients comes in the first visit, we have to tell them that all the sequences regarding various procedures, the child, what is the problem, and as you mentioned that it is not just closing the hole. So we have to tell them that it's not the just the gap which we have to close, but we have to explain them all the problems that they can come across during the growth of the child. And age-wise, as you mentioned, age-wise presentation, age-wise surgery of the patient, so that the child have a normal social life and get a best function outcome in terms of feeding and speech and dental rehabilitation. Basically, the aim is cosmetic as well as functional. As very well mentioned that functional. If a child have a hypernasal voice throughout his life, he feel less confident. So it's our aim that to address all these issues. And so basically these are the situations when we have to counsel the parents.
So what about the feeding problems that these kids have? How
Yes.
would you advise the parents to feed the children?
Yeah. Whenever a child with a cleft come to us, we have to. The important thing is about training about feeding, because the child do not suck milk. So the important thing is we have to properly train the parents so that they can have proper feeding, and patient can. The important thing is the patient have to gain the weight so that we can do all the procedures timely, because malnourished childs we cannot operate. Even sometimes in the rural areas, child are so malnourished that they succumb to death. So these are important things. There are some modifications we need to introduce to the parents, like ask them to take the baby in the lap with the hand supported against the arms, so that there's a less chance of regurgitation, as there is cleft palate. So the feed, if cleft lip is there, he will not be able to suck. If the cleft palate is there, he will not able to suck, and secondly, the regurgitation problem is there. So because of these reasons, a patient not be able to feed properly, and most of the time he keep on hungry and keep on crying. So we have to tell them that there is some modification like sitting positions I earlier mentioned. Then we can use some we can feed them with cutlery and spoon and give them small feeds. And in between small feeds, even small feeds are burping is very important because they'll ingest a lot of air in between with the feed. So this air needs to be escaped, needs to be get out. So that because of less milk and more air he sucked, so a sense of fast satiety comes to the child. So that need to be addressed, and in between, in between the short feeding, small amount of feed, we have to, we have to tell the parents how to birth the child, and this is secondly, use some simple bottles need some modifications. We have some bottles, we have long nipples, so that when we put a nipple in long nipples put in the child mouth, so it obliterates all the clefts inside, so that there is a blockage of the cleft, so the child able to suck through these bottles. These are some modifications.
I want to ask another question to Dr. Pawan Dixit as well. Sir, how would you choose which surgery to perform? Because there are so many options for repairing a cleft lip and palate. How would you choose a particular surgery that you would perform on the child?
Yeah, for cleft lip repair, there are a plethora of surgeries which were developed in the past, but as you mentioned in your presentation, currently two procedures are the most popular, which is Randall-Tennyson repair and Millard repair. Randall-Tennyson repair is usually a mathematical repair in which all the markings and measurement done preoperatively, and once you start the surgery, you can follow those incisions and cut and repair accordingly, keeping the cleft repair principles in the mind. So it is a very good surgery for beginners to understand, and it is pretty straightforward, but you cannot change the procedure or modify this procedure intraoperatively. So in some sense, it has that lacuna. Also, it provides extra tissue to the cleft. So some people advocate that it is better to use this procedure in wider clefts. But some people says the Millard procedure is equally efficient in dealing with that problem. Again, Randall-Tennyson repair distorts the filtral line because it puts the triangle in the lower aspect, and Millard doesn't do that. But ultimately, all downs to the surgeon's preference and his comfort with the procedure, because both procedures have been time-tested procedure and they have shown equally good results. For cleft palate repair, depending on what type of cleft it is isolated cleft palate or it is in with the association of cleft lip, the procedure is chosen. It also depends on how much width is there, is the cleft of only soft palate is present or the entire cleft is involved. But whatever procedure is chosen, the paramount important point is to do a proper muscle repair. Muscle should be properly detached from its abnormal insertion, and it should form a midline sling so that palate has its formal normal movement. If the patient doesn't have palatal movement, the child will later develop speech problems because of the velopharyngeal insufficiency, as you mentioned. So whatever procedure you choose, muscle repair is of paramount importance.
And so what would be your post-operative management once these surgeries have been performed?
Post-operative management is very important if you take aesthetics of the procedure in the mind. For example, after cleft lip repair, the arm restraint of the child is very important in immediate post-operative period. It can either be done by covering the both hands with dressing, or there are ready-made mittens for that purpose, so the child doesn't poke around the suture line with his own hands. In immediate post-operative period, strapping is very much required because if it avoids the tension on the suture line, because in post-operative period there is development of edema, which further stretches that. And then feeding advice, as sir said, feeding advice is very much important, and pre-op compliance of the child is very much required, because if the child is not used to the certain type of feeding, he will not be able to feed with new style of feeding in immediate post-operative period. So pre-op compliance of the child is very much important. Another thing is that the suture is usually removed at day 6. It should not be delayed because it will form a bad scar later in the life. Some people advocate that strapping should be continued for another month. Some people don't. They have their reasons and the philosophies behind it. For cleft palate, first 24 hours is very much important, because in some childs, in post-operative period, when the child cries, a lot of bleeding can occur. If it is a small bleeding, it can be managed by taking the child into prone position and put a gauze against the palate and press it. If it is large, then patient need to be taken to OT. And another thing is that again, in this population, feeding advice is equally important. Already said, if the child is older, then soft diet must continue for at least 3 to 4 weeks. And mouthwash or water after every feed is very much required. So these all are the post-operative care which we provide in the hospital. After all these, some complications may occur, but if we follow these principles, a proper aesthetic scar and a proper palatal flap will be there.
Thank you, sir. One last question for Dr. Deepti. Ma'am, if a child comes to you after a cleft palate has been repaired, say once the child starts speaking, and the parents are concerned that the voice is not normal, so how would you decide what to do next? What would be your line of action after that?
See, Aniket, you have already described it that velopharyngeal insufficiency is mainly responsible for speech difficulty. What actually happens when the soft palate doesn't come in contact with the posterior pharyngeal wall? So there remains the communication between these two cavities. So the speech, there is a speech errors, like there is a more nasal emission and articulation speech errors. So for that purpose, first we have to examine the child. Sometimes it happens that there is a enlarged tonsils or enlarged adenoids that causes the speaking difficulty. We have to rule out, because many times we try to elongate the palate or do the procedures without seeing that it could be corrected with just tonsillectomy. So first we have to rule out these things by examining the patient clinically. And once we have seen that either the levator is shortened or there is a lateral pharyngeal wall, there is a deficiency, there is a weak lateral pharyngeal wall, then we have to go with some investigations like video fluoroscopy or nasoendoscopy. So in that we see at which pattern, what is the size. So these all things decides. Mainly we see the coronal pattern is very commonly seen, and followed by circular and sagittal. So for all these, either we lengthen the soft palate so that it reaches the posterior pharyngeal wall by the procedure just you have shown in your this presentation, by this lengthening by the Z-plasties, or we can augment the posterior wall by some implants or cartilages, or we can use posterior pharyngeal flap to bring it to the soft palate. And if we see there is a weakness in the lateral pharyngeal wall, then we have to do with the sphincteropharyngoplasty. So,
Ma'am, at what age would you want to do these surgeries?
usually the child comes at the 3 to 4, when he started speaking sentence, 3 to 4 years is means we can make out that he's having some defect in the speeches. So at that stage,
Before he starts going to school?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, even after that, some child comes even after that. So at that case, role of speech therapy is very important. We can modify the speech so that it's more understandable to the normal. So speech therapy is also very important in that, as far as the voice rehabilitation is concerned. One question Dr. Nandaloda has raised, sir. Yes, you are absolutely right. Smile is doing a lot of work regarding cleft lip and cleft palate and associated procedures. We are in touch with the team. Actually, this area has a different perception in the world. This is that it's a desert area, so people are very less there. So they are saying that they are already here. One center in the private setup is there, the Smile Brain. So they are considering that one center is sufficient for cover this area. But we are in process to convincing them that this is not that area as the perceptions comes across the India and the rest of the part of India, and we are convincing them that it is a advanced center in this area, and it's a big area. It's basically covers so many districts. So we are in process, and hopefully that within course of time we will able to convince them, and we will have a really smile brain center here. Anything else? Anybody
Yeah,
want
good
to
morning.
ask?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to congratulate the team Plastic Surgery that has brought up such a nicely, the complete aspects of cleft lip and palate. Here, I would like to add something that basically this is for the pediatricians who encounter these patients at the first go. That it's for them to, convince these patients that this patient would require the, those. Uh, Guidance and surgeries which include right from breastfeeding, the feeding difficulties. One more suggestion that I have, that if we take a 5 ml syringe and put a milk in it, and we can put it in the buccal vestibule, when we put it inside, the patient usually does not regurgitates it, and as rightly pointed by Dr. Kala, that we have to burp, as aerophagia is pretty large in these patients. And then nasoalveolar molding is required, for which there are different specialists available, orthodontists are available over here. And after that, these surgeries, they just don't stop at speech therapy. Because of the scar contracture that is there, usually these patients require orthognathic surgeries, and finally the implant placement that continues almost till 18 years of age. So I think so, when the patient is having the first contact, it is the right time when we are able to convince the patient or the patients, obviously their parents, that these patients to get into the normal phase of looks, normal phase of deglutition, normal phase of eating, normal phase of speaking, would require multiple surgeries, and they have to be psychologically counseled for that.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your valuable inputs and encouragement. Definitely, whatever you said is absolutely right. And we are, as the patient is coming, we are following that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, to listen carefully.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.